Hello, welcome to Vet Med Corner. I'm Dr. M. Today we are going to discuss why we should modify behavior for all animal species in the way that science has shown us is most ethical, kind, and works the best. So join me, you'll learn something. So when we are discussing behavior modification, it's important to remember that there are four quadrants, four different ways that we can modify behaviors. Now, I'm not saying we should use all of them, just that there are four ways that it's possible. And we define these by reward and punishment. We also define it as adding and taking away. So, for example, when you have positive reinforcement, that means that we are adding a reinforcer to increase the frequency that a behavior happens. When we have positive punishment, what that means is we are adding a punishment to decrease the likelihood that a behavior happens. We can also see that some people use negative reinforcement. What happens in these situations is an aversive or something that the animal doesn't like is applied, and that is maintained until the animal does the behavior that we are wanting. This is used a lot in horse training, and it's also used for other species. You will see people push down on the back end of a dog, trying to get the dog to sit. They will push on that dog until the dog sits, and when the dog is sitting, they let go of the aversive. There are also people who will use positive punishment, and so what that means is adding something that the animal finds aversive after a behavior has occurred in order to reduce the frequency of that behavior. So for example, I'll see often a dog jumps up on someone, that person knees them in the chest, and the dog finds that aversive, painful, and so it reduces the frequency that they jump up on someone. People will also use shock collars, pinch collars, choke collars, prong collars. All of these fall under the positive punishment realm of training. And I'm not saying this is what we should be using. I'm just saying these are examples of how this type of behavior modification is applied. So let's go on to positive reinforcement, as this is the quadrant of behavior modification that research has clearly, definitively shown us is the most effective, is the safest, is the most ethical, and is the kindest to the learner. So let's delve with more detail into what that means. First, we need to consider who experts are. As we've discussed previously in this channel, when we are looking at and assessing information, we need to be considering who that information is coming from. And we need to be looking for consensus statements from experts in this field. Veterinary behaviorist is a veterinarian who has then gone on to do specialized training in behavior and who have an in-depth understanding of behavior and how to modify it. They're doing research in it. They are also very well versed in appropriate prescription medications that can be used. So we should look to what veterinary behaviorists tell us about behavior modification. And they do have a position statement indicating that positive reinforcement is the way that we need to be modifying the behavior of all the animals that we interact with. There are also a ton of other organizations that put out position statements about positive reinforcement, including humane societies, SPCAs, and so on. And this goes for all species. These principles are not different if you are looking at training a horse, a dog, a cat, a bird, a human. And this is what is also being used for all of our zoo animals. And so there is no reason to be saying, oh, but X species or X breed needs a heavy hand. This just isn't true, and the most predatory and aggressive species can successfully have behavior modification with positive reinforcement. All right, so the next reason why we recommend using positive reinforcement is because of the 5 freedoms that all animals should have. And included in there is the freedom from fear, stress, anxiety, and we have so many research studies that indicate that using the other quadrants of the behavior modification increase stress behaviors, fear behaviors, cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And when we use positive reinforcement, we don't see that. So using positive reinforcement is better for animal welfare. This is so important because I know that you want to do what's best for all of your pets. Another part of the 5 freedoms is that our animals are free to do species-specific behaviors that are normal for them. And when we use positive reinforcement, this enables our dogs to communicate with us and it gives them the freedom to try things. When positive reinforcement is not used, we know that this suppresses behaviors. We also know that positive reinforcement is better to use because it's better for the animals. There was a study in 2014 that showed that using positive reinforcement makes our dogs happier. And the most likely explanation for this is what's now been termed the eureka effect. And so when any species is trying to figure something out and then you get it, it feels so good. And it makes you want to keep trying things. It makes you want to keep learning. It keeps you engaged. And that reward is very fulfilling and fun. I think about how I do the Wordle every day. I do this because trying something and then succeeding at it is rewarding, and we can give that same sensation to our pets when we give them things that they can succeed at and reward them. And so because this is using the brain, this means that positive reinforcement training is excellent enrichment, and that's part of why it's included in my video on canine and feline enrichment. I'll link both of them in the video description below in case you'd like more information. Using positive reinforcement is actually more successful than using everything else. We have studies that show animals that are taught with positive reinforcement check in with their people more. They are more motivated to change their behavior. They have more fun doing so. They bond better with their people, which is something we all want. They are less likely to have behavior problems like fear or anxiety or aggression. So if an animal has a history of rewards-based training, they learn to anticipate those rewards, which is likely part of the reason why this is so much more effective than any other type of training. Just all around a clear winner. There will be people who don't know how to properly modify behavior and they will say, but it didn't work for my dog or cat or other animal. But in reality, what's actually going on is that the person just doesn't have a proper training plan or proper mechanics or proper timing, a proper reinforcer, etc. You gotta consider this a little bit like comparing yourself to a professional golfer. I'm terrible at golf and I can watch other people golf, I can read about it, I can do all of those things, and if I go to a golf course, I probably won't even hit the ball if I swing at it. Does that mean that what all of these experts are doing is wrong or doesn't work? No. The problem's with me, my timing, my mechanics, how I'm holding the golf club, where I'm standing, where I'm looking, everything matters. And it's the same with behavior modification for animals. Just because you watch someone else do it or you read about it does not mean that you then have the skills to successfully implement training plans on your own. So it's very important that you work with strictly positive reinforcement trainers in order to get appropriate training plans. Learn how to teach things to your pets in a way that's successful. They can also be a kind outside eye to help you with your timing, with your mechanics, with where you're placing your reward, with what you're using for reward, and so on. Another reason using positive reinforcement is wonderful is because it's fun. When you're working with any animal this way, you are working as a team and you're working together towards a goal, and When the animal is enjoying it, that makes it fun for the human too, because we want to give our pets the best things possible, and we want them to like us, and we want to like them. And when you're using positive reinforcement, it sets up the stage to be successful. And I also want to cover one last aspect. It's that positive reinforcement is the ethical way to approach behavior modification. And let's think about this critically here for a minute. Our animals are not born knowing what it is we want them to do. They don't speak our language. They don't use the same body language we do. When we're talking, all they hear is blah, 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 right? It's our responsibility as the humans with the big brains to help them learn what it is we are looking for. Now, if you are not actually teaching them that behavior, this isn't ethical. If all you're doing is punishing them anytime they do anything else, this is frustrating for the learner. It causes pain. It ruins their welfare. It increases the likelihood of aggression, which means that safety is a concern if you're not using positive reinforcement. We must strive to show our animals what behavior we are looking for using positive reinforcement and management of the environment so that we prevent them from doing behaviors that are unsafe or undesirable, but that sets them up to be successful and to learn what it is we do want from them so that everybody can be as happy as possible. Hello, welcome to BMC. I'm Dr. M. This here is my lovely cat. Today we are going to talk some more about behavior modification. We're going to cover punishment and more specifically positive punishment. So adding an aversive after a behavior in order to reduce that frequency of behavior. Join me, you'll learn something. So first of all, I will give some examples of positive punishment. So think of if a person knees a dog in the chest after the dog jumps up. The aversive is the pain from being kneed in the chest, and that is applied after the behavior in the hopes of reducing the jumping up behavior. People will also use shock collars. They will also use pinch collars and choke chains. They will also use leash pops or corrections. They will also use things like alpha or dominance roles, and all of these fall under the positive punishment umbrella. So does yelling, hitting, kicking, even giving your dog a talking to. So one of the concerns with using positive punishment is that these aversives hinder animal welfare. There are a bunch of studies that have looked into this, and what was found is that using punishment causes fear behaviors, anxiety behaviors, avoidance behaviors. So think of things like crouching down, yelping in pain, avoiding head turns, lip licking. All of these things are signs of stress in dogs, and they've all been demonstrated in research where positive punishment was used during behavior modification. We also have research showing that punishment increases cortisol, so stress hormone levels. And what was interesting in the one study from 2004 was that the dogs showed these fear and stress behaviors even when not actively training. They also showed these behaviors in new environments. And all of this is, of course, a major problem because this punishment has long-lasting effects on the welfare of the learner, and it's one of the incredibly important reasons why we must not use punishment. Another major problem with using punishment is that it increases the risks of aggression in the learner, and this becomes a safety problem not only for the learning animal, but for any other animals and people that they interact with. And this aggression risk extends to family as well as to strangers. This is a major safety problem. And the other concern we have with using punishment is that a lot of aggression behaviors from animals is actually based in fear. And so if you have an animal that's unsure, unconfident, fearful of a situation, and then something horrible happens to them in that situation, what they learn is that they were right to be fearful, and it just makes their fear worse. They become more and more likely to become aggressive as they feel that they're being backed into a corner with no other option. It does often surprise people when I tell them that we have a research study from 2004 that showed, even for pet owners, that people who use positive punishment report more behavior problems with their animals than people that don't use positive punishment. But when you think about it, this really shouldn't be surprising. One of the major ethical issues with positive punishment is that it doesn't teach the animal what it is we want from them. And so if you aren't teaching them the desired behavior, they have no way to know what it is you're looking for. And so, of course, they're going to have more behavior issues. Also, we know that punishment decreases the animal's ability and desire to learn and to change their behavior. And this makes a lot of sense too. If you think about if you were in school and your teacher just hit you every time you did something wrong, you wouldn't learn anything. They have to show you how to do math, how to structure a sentence. They have to demonstrate it, and they have to reward you when you succeed and do that well. That's how we and all animal species learn new skills, is when we are shown them in a way we can understand it and rewarded for when we do learn that new skill. It's the same for our pets. Another major issue with using positive punishment is that it's not guaranteed that the animal will learn what behavior is associated with the punishment. So say you are walking along a sidewalk and you see another dog, and your dog is fearful of other dogs and starts to react, and you punish them for it. They might associate that punishment with that environment, with you as their person, with whatever gear you use to punish them, with anything in the surroundings, with that particular location, with the other people that are with the other dog, with the color of the dog, with anything. And this is why we absolutely must not use punishment. We're going to cause fear and stress in the animals we are punishing without actually teaching them what we are wanting them to learn. And this is also a huge contributor to all of the dog bites that we hear about, especially when people say they came out of the blue. So many of those animals were punished in the past for growling, but the reason why they growled was never addressed. Their fear about whatever was going on was never addressed. And so the animal learns not to growl, and instead they go straight to biting. This is because punishment suppresses behavior, but it doesn't change the behavior, and it also doesn't change the reason for that behavior. If you want to be successful with changing a behavior of one of your animals, you need to teach them the alternate behavior you want them to do, and you need to address why the original behavior started in the first place. So to summarize, we know that punishment causes aggression, fear, stress, harms animal welfare, causes more behavior problems, and is a safety risk. But on top of all of that, we also have research showing that positive reinforcement works better than punishment does. And so there really is no reason to use punishment. We have studies using positive reinforcement for recalls. We also have research in obedience trials and in a few other situations, including with regular pet owners, all demonstrating that positive reinforcement is more effective. That's one of the reasons the 2017 analysis from Zev et al. Concludes that there is no acceptable reason to use punishment when we know all of the risks and fallout from using it. with zero benefits. This research into the best way to modify animal behavior has been going on for decades, and it has been very conclusive that there's no reason to use punishment. If anybody ever tells you, well, I tried the shock collar or the pinch collar on myself and it didn't hurt, you need to tell them a few things. First of all, human skin is much thicker than dog skin. So the dog's neck is about 3 to 5 cells thick, where on the human neck, we're looking more about 15 cells thick. So their neck is going to be way more sensitive than ours is. Also, we need to think about what all exists anatomy-wise in the neck. The trachea is there, the jugular is there, even deeper than that we have arteries that supply blood to the body. Damaging any of those structures is incredibly serious. We need to be very careful of the delicate structures of the neck and not apply punishment to them. The other huge thing to think about is that if you put a shock collar on yourself and zap yourself, you know when that shock is coming, you know why it's there, and you are controlling it. There is a huge difference to that sort of a shock compared to one where you have no control over when it comes and you don't understand why it comes, and all you know is that randomly you get pain on your neck. That causes learned helplessness and a lot of distress for the animal that is being punished, and it's not okay to do. The 2018 study from Masson and al. Looked at ultrasonic collars as well as electric fence collars and other types of shock collars, and concluded that there is zero evidence that supports their use and a lot of evidence supporting how it causes learned helplessness, fear, aggression, and doesn't appropriately modify the behavior in any way that's safe or ethical. It also isn't very successful. And it's for that reason that so many countries have already banned using these punishment tools. There's no appropriate way to use them, although people will try to tell you that. They are lying. We need to follow suit and ban them as well. We do know that a balanced trainer is also unacceptable. These are people who will use some positive reinforcement and they also use positive punishment. The animal never knows, are they going to get the nice person or the punishing person? We need to be removing punishment from how we try to train our animals, and we need to be using positive reinforcement. Unfortunately, there are so many trainers who are not skilled enough or who do not have a current knowledge base, and it's crucially important that you avoid them. This also goes for veterinarians. There are more veterinarians than I'd like to admit who still are recommending and using punishment. It's not appropriate. Find another veterinarian. It's so important to remember that there is no reason to use punishment when trying to train our animals. And people that have skills and current knowledge and that follow the research will not be recommending or using punishment. So make sure to use the blog I'll link below that tells you some reputable training certifications that you can look for people that should be using positive reinforcement to help guide you. And also remember that the training industry is not at all regulated. And so there's no guarantees that anybody who calls themselves a trainer actually is or has any education or certification. All right. Well, I hope that you've learned something today. Next week, we will be discussing dominance and dominance theory, as I hear this being misunderstood and misused all the time. Hello, I'm Dr. M. Welcome to VMC. Today we are going to do part 3 of this behavior series. We're discussing dominance. We will discuss what it is, what part it should play in our training plans, and you should join me. You'll learn something. So the definition when we're referring to animal behavior is that this is a behavior between individuals that is done to establish access to desired resources. So food, mating abilities, desired sleeping places, etc. And this dominance is established through force, aggression, and submission. This relationship is not established until one animal consistently defers to the other animal. So I hear a number of different false ideas about dominance that go around a lot. And the first one is that the research indicates dominance is not a personality trait. It is a fluid thing that will depend on situation and the group of the individuals. We know this because if you have a group that has an established dominance ranking system that then gets put into another group of animals, that ranking system will get changed up entirely. It's also important that we recognize dominance cannot be used to describe interactions with inanimate objects. I will hear people say, oh, my dog is trying to be dominant because he wants on the couch or he wants on the bed. Your dog cannot assert dominance with an inanimate object. So some species do have dominance ranked hierarchies. Common examples I think of are bulls and roosters, and there are many others. It appears the common reason that some animal species do this is because there is competition to pass your genetic material on. So in these species, the most fit animal will be the only one or close to the only one that has any access to females for breeding, and so their genetic material is much more likely to be passed on. It's very important that we understand that wolves and dogs do not have a dominance hierarchy. There was one point where researchers thought that maybe wolves did, but now that we have additional research on wolves and how their packs form, we understand it is not a dominance hierarchy at all, and researchers have stopped referring to the wolves in alpha terms, and what we know is that the packs that wolves have are actually more like family units. And so the male and female will breed, and their offspring will stay with them as part of the pack. And as a family unit, they must cooperate together in order to hunt and to survive. And so the parents are leaders because of experience and being parents, but they are not leaders because of dominance hierarchy, and they are not alphas. It's also important that we understand that dogs have changed and they are not wolves anymore over the time that they have spent beside humans. So dogs are now defined more as a scavenger species with a promiscuous mating system. It is not a dominance hierarchy at all. So thinking that we need to dominate a dog based on outdated information and incorrect information from wolf studies is such a faulty thing to even try to implement. We should not be doing that. One way that people will be told to assert dominance is to use an alpha role or a dominance role, and these are not effective. They don't teach the dog what we are wanting from them. It doesn't address the underlying reason for why the dog was doing the behavior in the first place, and all it does is increase fear and anxiety and increase the risk of that dog being aggressive, and therefore this is a safety problem for the humans as well. Do not use these alpha roles. You need to work with a strictly positive reinforcement trainer who has science-based education in order to learn how to change your pet's behavior. It's also important that we understand that even if there is an established dominance hierarchy, that does not at all mean that this is a peaceful existence. And this is something very important to consider, especially for in our own households, and why you don't want to have a dominance hierarchy. So if we look at things like lions and elephant seals, even if there is a stable dominance hierarchy, there are still frequent displays of aggression and animals getting hurt. And these dominant individuals do not remain in their position of dominance for long. For lions, it's roughly 2 years. Elephant seals, it might be a little bit longer, but still like a few years. And during those years, they are still constantly having to display aggression in order to maintain their rank. And over time, that stability is not possible to maintain anymore. And this is a situation we just don't want to set up in our households. It's dangerous. We should not be constantly having to be aggressive to our pets. This risks harm to our pets, and it also increases the likelihood that our pets will become aggressive and fearfully aggressive, which means that the likelihood of humans being bitten or scratched or harmed is extremely high, and this is not an acceptable way to approach management of our pets. So why do our cats and dogs do some of these behaviors that humans often find undesirable? Well, the short answer has nothing to do with dominance. It's because that behavior is somehow rewarding to that individual. So, for example, why might your one dog chase your other dog or chase your cat? Because it's fun, because dogs enjoy chasing things that run away from them. And that chase is rewarding to the individual because it releases adrenaline and it is a desirable feeling that is rewarding to that individual. Why would our pets want to be on elevated surfaces? Well, for cats, it's often because they feel safer there. Vertical enrichment is very important for our cats, why it's such a big part of my feline husbandry video. Cats really need that space up and away to feel safe and to be able to rest. So that ability to rest and feel safe is rewarding to the cat, which is why they continue to seek out elevated spaces. For our dogs, why might they want to be on the couch or the bed? Because it's comfortable. I mean, the comfort of that location is rewarding to the animal. It has absolutely nothing to do with dominance. So when people use dominance-based training methods, what we know from our research studies is that it increases the likelihood of fearful behavior from the animals, tenseness, lip licking, yawning, averting the gaze, crouching, avoidance behaviors, etc. And the other thing that we know is that using these types of training methods increases the likelihood that those animals become aggressive. This is because they feel pushed and like they have no other alternative because their body cues and their body language and their fear is not being listened to. And when they become, as they feel, stuck in a corner, then they will either freeze or run away or they will fight. And so a lot of the aggression behaviors are fear-based. The more dominance and punishment that is used on pets, the higher the likelihood that they become aggressive. So what we have to do instead is use humane, ethical training methods that address the underlying emotional state of the animal and the reason for why they are acting the way that they do. So if you know that your dog is chasing something because it's fun, then you need to figure out a different behavior that is safe for everybody involved, that still is fun for your pet, and have them do that behavior instead. If you have an animal like a dog that is fearfully reactive to other dogs and they're barking and lunging and a very aggressive behavioral display, this isn't because they're trying to be dominant. In the vast majority of cases, reactivity like that is fear-based, although sometimes it's frustration-based. So the underlying cause for that behavior needs to be figured out and then addressed, and then we can change the underlying emotional component, give the pet safer and desirable behaviors to do instead. And this will be much more safe, effective, and humane for everybody who's involved. Now, it's important that we understand that positive reinforcement is not permissive. This means that we must remember we still have the responsibility of keeping our pets safe. So we need to manage the environment in ways that helps to keep them safe, and we need to reward the behaviors that we do want until they become habitual for the dog or cat, because we know that when we reward behavior, it will increase in frequency in the future. Giving food as a reward is often one of the best ways to do this. This does not reinforce the dominance. What it is instead doing is addressing the underlying emotion of fear. So instead of a situation being associated with something scary, now we can keep the pet under their threshold of fear and show them that in these situations, good things are happening instead. And over time, the animal will learn and change their behavior because their emotions are being appropriately addressed. Well, on this channel, we put out new videos most Fridays. Please comment if you've learned something today, if you have a video topic that you'd like me to cover in the future. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye!